Today we're going to look at how to make complex shapes using paths. This is something that can be very useful if you don't want to design something from scratch and instead want to do it programmatically. So an example, we're going to look at the SpaceX logo as a good example of a complex shape we can use. We're going to just focus on the X part of the logo since that's the coolest part of it. Once you crop the X, adjust the size so it's a good size to work with in good proportion, something like 600 by 400 pixels. It's going to look blurry, but that's okay. We're not actually using the graphics for anything. We're going to assign points to each of the corners because paths are just connect different parts of the logo by connecting points. We're also going to use something called an anchor point, which we'll demonstrate here. It's something that pulls a line away in a direction and makes it curved. So when you move the anchor point left or right or up and down, that affects the curve of the line, and clearly we'll need it here for the X. Once you've numbered each corner, then you need the coordinates. And an easy way to do this on a Mac is by dragging a rectangle in Preview, and it'll tell you what the cross section is. And once you go through finding what each point is that you need to connect, just write down the coordinates and then before we jump into Xcode, and it's going to make our lives much easier. So you essentially use this tool to find out what the coordinates of each point is, and it's going to be very, very easy after that. So let's start Xcode, launch a project, name it anything, it doesn't really matter, and we'll show you how to start using paths. So when you have a blank project, just close everything you don't need, and delete also the last section of code, which is just for a preview, which we're not going to be using. And we're going to start by making a new struct. And this struct is going to be the path that we're going to create. We're going to call it SX logo. It's a shape. And inside that shape, we're going to create a function that returns a path. So it's a path with a rectangle, which is a CGRect, and returns a path as its output. So once we have that created, inside it, we'll create a variable called path, and it's a new path. Now we need to create our points. So we'll say let P1 equal a CG point, and we'll have to give the coordinates that we collected from the previous steps. So here for an X coordinate, we're going to give a CG float of 47, 186. So X is 47 and Y is 186. So instead of me typing all of this live, I'm going to pause the video and enter all of the coordinates here, and we're going to have 11 points. So here are the points, and you'll see a lot of warnings from Xcode because it thinks that you have all these variables that you're not actually using, but we will use them now when we create the path. So we'll say path move to point 1, and that's where we'll start drawing the lines and connecting the different points. Then after that, we have path add line to point 2, and then point 3, point 4, and then back to point 1 to form that little rectangular shape of the top of the X. So just keep adding lines to make the top rectangle. So from 2 to 3 to 4 and back to 1. And the last one is add line back to 1, point 1. And once we have that, we are ready to test our work and see what it looks like. We don't need the placeholder text. Instead, we say SX logo. We'll give it a frame of the same dimensions that we gave our cropping earlier, which is 600 by 400. And then we're going to give it a foreground color of red because that's something that is pretty obvious and easy to look at. So we're going to run it quickly in our simulator to look at what that looks like. And we have an error. We forgot to return a path at the end of that function. So once we do that, we should be good to go. And there it is. If we flip the simulator to the side, it's easier to see. So we have the top left corner of the logo, and all we do now is keep connecting the different points so that we form the rest of the logo. So the bottom corner is going to start at point 5 and go to 6, then to 7, then to 8, and then back to 5. So remember path.addLine, and you need to just give it a point to draw a line to. So we do all the different segments of the bottom right corner, and then from P8 back to P5. And now when we run the app, we should see the bottom right corner as well. There we go. So now all that's left is the long curved part of the logo, which is the hardest one to draw. So we'll start at point 9 and connect it to point 10 with a straight line. That's the easy part. And then we're going to connect point 10 to point 11 with something called an add quad curve. And here we're saying connect to point 11 and use a control of something else. The anchor point is what they're looking for, so that SwiftUI knows how much to bend that line. So we're going to say use a point with coordinates 250, 102. And we'll have to tweak this a little bit to see what looks good, but it's a good starting point. So we'll use that. And then we add another quad curve back to point 9 to connect the 3 different points. So that looks a little bit off. So we're going to tweak this to 120 on the y coordinate. And it should look pretty good. It's not exactly, but we can spend as much time as we want tweaking it to get it perfectly right. But that's it. That's a quick tutorial on how to do complex shapes using paths. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments.